who has written a book. Folks, this book is about 43 pages. If you can't read this, you are too busy. The name of the book is The Truth About the IRS Scandals. Charles, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So you were listening in on our discussion about the importance of truth and investigating and getting your facts straight when it was coming to miracles. That might or might not have been unexpected on your part. But we do also want to know the truth about what is happening in our country. And you've written a very handy, short, which is important for Americans, short expose on what the IRS has been up to. Not that I have anything against the IRS. I just want to let that go over the airwaves.
Please.
So, Charles, tell us what's going on.
Well, the topics of truth are extremely important, and so there's the famous Bible quote of John 8:32: "You shall know the truth, and it shall set you free." And I set about writing this short little book on the IRS to kind of really examine what was going on with the IRS scandal. And it's a shocking story. It explains kind of in detail why they were doing the targeting that they were doing of going after conservative and religious groups. And it goes into detail as much as 43 pages can. And I've got to say, having written a 43-page book and a near 400-page book, it's actually much harder to write the 43-page book because you're constantly leaving things out and making every word count.
And I'm also a writer. I write for our monthly magazine, the AFA Journal. And isn't it true, Charles, what editors don't understand is that what they're cutting out is gold. I mean, they're cutting out, award-winning material when they take the red pen to what you have written. Isn't that true?
Of course. Every writer has award-winning gold that just happens to be cut out by editors.
That's right.
Talk about, we all, most of our listeners obviously heard what happened last year when the stories broke about the IRS and their targeting of conservative groups for extra scrutiny or for denial of their tax-exempt status, and the politics involved there. That's, I know it was the butt of a lot of jokes, on late-night TV and so forth, but what we're talking about here is the power of the federal government to control people's lives and quite frankly, could have very well controlled the last election cycle, because what happened with the Tea Party, of course, they were against the Obama administration policies. And what happens there, Charles, you deny people the right to exist, basically. You can, especially in states, might be swing states like Ohio, Virginia, Florida, some others, you can affect the election.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's very clear that the intent of sort of the left-wing radicals sort of teaming up with the IRS was to stop the conservatives from having their ground game get out, to get out.
Especially in Ohio, maybe? Especially in Ohio?
I mean, especially Ohio, especially Pennsylvania, especially Missouri. What we found that was really interesting is, if your listeners just know one thing about my little booklet, The Truth About the IRS Scandals, it's the teaming up of big data, of using Google-style analytics and Google-style computer algorithms with the IRS that has made the scandal so pernicious. So, in the past, it used to take a lot of work to do the IRS targeting that occurred during the Clinton administration. You'd have to go, and not all the systems were as computerized as they are now, and it would require a lot of work. Now what you can do is any IRS agent above a certain clearance level can go to a Google-style search engine, and they can type in somebody's tax return information, their name, the name, a type of word, like if they're conservative or Christian, and then they pull up all of the different tax returns that are associated with that name or with those search words. And so it's like having the power of Google at your fingertips to search everyone's tax returns. And then what they do with that information is they take it and they leak it out to their allies in the media. And that's, of course, what they did with the National Organization for Marriage.
How can people get a copy of your, it's a booklet, really. It's a small, as you say, easy-to-read book, but it's the truth about the IRS scandals, and it's very informative. How can people get a copy of this?
One of the best ways to do it is to go to Amazon.com. That's probably the best and cheapest way for your audience. They can also find me at charlescjohnson.com, and I can send them information that way.
charlescjohnson.com. I want to ask you this. Lois Lerner, that was the lady's name who was in charge of the IRS that got called before the Congress to testify, right?
That's right.
Okay. She was in charge of the IRS. When Darrell Issa, the chairman of that committee, I don't know what the committee was called, but he's the chairman of the committee, called her, and people remember this, I don't know when it was, 10 months ago or so. And so you have the person in charge of the IRS who knows about these scandals and can answer questions. She pleads the Fifth Amendment before a congressional hearing, and everybody's the Obama administration, I guess, is I don't know what they told her to do, but evidently she felt like it was so serious, whatever she was involved in. This is my interpretation. I don't know how you read it any other way. This is so serious that the questions I answer here, even though I'm a public servant and I should have nothing to hide,
right,
the questions that I answer here could lead to incrimination, could lead to incarceration.
Right.
And so I'm not going to answer them. I'm going to plead. My lawyer tells me to plead the Fifth Amendment. Of course, then she didn't. She read
an open statement.
She read an opening statement, which, as we know now, really legally surrendered her Fifth Amendment rights. But Darrell Issa, the chairman of the did he ever call her back? Has she been back to testify?
No, he didn't. He didn't, unfortunately.
Why don't the Republicans on this issue? I respect Darrell Issa. I've seen him. He's a very intelligent man. But why don't they push the issue here? She needed to be called. Didn't you think she needed to be called back up and said, "Ma'am, you can't not testify"? Go ahead.
No, I mean that's exactly right. It's amazing. Alan Dershowitz, many other legal experts said that you can't say as she did, which is I've done nothing wrong, I plead the Fifth. That's because technically when you say I have done nothing wrong, you're already pleading.
Right.
And so you can't deliver this impassioned speech she did and then say I plead the Fifth.
And walk out. He dismissed her. She walked out of the hearing. And I'm going, wait a minute. Hold on. This is a hearing by a public servant in charge of the IRS. We're talking about extremely serious allegations here of abuse of power against American citizens by the IRS, and you can just walk out of the room and not have to answer questions and not be called back up. And wow, that must be nice. Just plead the Fifth Amendment and be along your merry way.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe there's subsequent things to happen here, but it hasn't happened yet. And I'm just wondering, isn't this a responsibility of the Congress to oversee this and make sure this doesn't happen? That is abuse of power, to push the issues. What has happened to Lois Lerner?
She's been allowed to retire with pay, and I believe she's also gotten a job with an IRS tax law firm. What's kind of shocking about the whole thing is how little due diligence the Republicans actually do.
Well, tell us about it.
It's usually the Republicans as well as the conservative media is very reactive to various scandals, and that's kind of shocking. And it's what's the most disturbing thing about this whole scandal. It's just the sheer scope of it. I mean, they really went through every nook and cranny of people's tax returns. Asking people about the quality of their prayers, asking people about what books they were reading. And what's interesting about the whole thing is that or if we, what would be the most disturbing thing to your listeners is just the sheer scope of the whole thing, and that once they got the answers to those questions, they held them in their files and then leaked them out to the George Soros media.
Who did?
And then,
who
of course,
did?
they would later be picked up later on.
Who leaked them out?
You're saying the IRS leaked out the information?
They did that with donor information with the National Organization for Marriage.
Yeah, they did.
They did that with filmmaker Joel Gilbert, who did a movie called Dreams from My Real Father. And what the purpose of these organizations were to do was to push restrictions on how much political speech organizations could have. Many of the IRS top officials, including Lois Lerner, were opposed to the Citizens United Supreme Court case. President Obama himself, of course, attacked the Citizens United case in a speech before Congress, and the whole purpose of it was to get a court case that would overturn Citizens United, because the IRS did not want a limited government anti-tax mass movement, because they are a whole bunch of tax collectors, and tax collectors obviously want more taxes to collect. And so what they would do is they would use their allies in the media to kind of set narratives against both conservative donors, as well as intimidate any conservative donor into not giving money.
Mm-hmm.
And there were many conservative donors I spoke with in Wisconsin and elsewhere who were intimidated, who were threatened.
It worked. It worked.
Yes.
It worked,
Yes.
and so that affects elections. One of the largest ironies here is the political left in this country has for years, they've preached the fear of the right wing, and that the right wing was, sort of like the Gestapo, the modern day Gestapo, and they were going to find out who you were and come after you and restrict your rights and all this. And today, the chief violator of civil liberties is the political left in this country, namely President Barack Obama. And it's rare that you see criticism of him from the political left, from the liberal media. I did see one editorial by the Los Angeles Times saying this guy's worse than Bush, on civil liberties. You would think the ACLU would be screaming to high heaven, and maybe they have said some things against the Obama administration, but he uses, President Obama authorizes the use of drones all over the world, which the political left, hates. Right. I'm not saying there is an appropriate time to use drones, but he uses them more than President Bush did.
Right.
Far more does the Obama administration. Then you got all these scandals, the NSA with Verizon. You've got the IRS targeting conservative groups. You've got the spying on reporters, the AP. Remember right. that there's so many. This is like Bill Clinton's affairs. There's so many you forget about them all. About number 3 because right. But I mean, you got abuse of power. All written all over the Obama administration. I mean, he set new precedents here, Charles. And so I guess I'm saying it's ironic that it's a liberal left-wing president that's the chief violator of civil liberties today. Right. When the political left was scared of the general American public for years, saying you wait till those right wingers get in charge, and they're going to use the power of the federal government to control your lives. Go ahead.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, part of the reason I got involved in journalism generally is that I had seen so little real due diligence into investigating the president and his background. And I've been disappointed in a number of journalists who have just refused to do any real investigations of President Obama.
Well, they don't know what to do with it because they're liberal, and so they agree with the president's ideology and his policies, but they don't know how to criticize him for violating civil liberties because it might damage his political agenda.
And they don't want to see that.
They don't want to do that happen. So they're kind of stuck in in the.
Which is why journalists should make their political ideology secondary to their job.
But they don't,
whether you're conservative or liberal politically, should come second. You should do the job as a